Oman Ghana continues to disrespect and trample on its women with the same vigor that it expends on adulating our mothers. The public celebration of our mothers has become just another shopping opportunity rather than taking stock of the progress towards gender equality. As gender issues have become pervasive in mainstream politics, we need to be on our utmost guard that it is not tokenism to derail and marginalize progress towards equality. Welcome to Tarzan's Take. After the creation of a unique political platform to prosecute discrimination and promote equal status in words and deeds, it's an opportune time to put the progress and drawbacks of the campaign for gender equality under critical scrutiny. Number one, has the establishment of a specific ministry brought any value and benefits to the campaign towards gender equality in Ghana? Have we become complacent in measuring progress by the number of laws that we pass rather than the practical application of these laws? What are the effective remedies for women for the slew of discriminatory and demeaning practices which persist still in our society today? And how do we build a more effective coalition between the advocates and the political process in order to attain the needed synergy to make real and substantial progress on gender equality? We are privileged to have a first woman guest on Tarzan's Take. I apologize for that. And none is more appropriate than Dorcas Coker-Appiah, Executive Director, Gender and Human Rights Documentation Center. Join us after a short break for our wheat from chaff commentary, which sets the scene and the context for the chat that we shall be having tonight.
Every Ghanaian living everywhere, whether male or female, single or married, places his or her mother on the highest pedestal of their regard, respect and affection. We acknowledge and celebrate our mothers for everything good that has happened in our lives and devote substantial amounts of our time and energies eulogizing our mothers in both words and many deeds.
Our upbringing, there was one thing that we never really thought to say. And I don't think that for all these years in my life I've ever said that to my mother. Yeah, and I think today I want to say it.
Yes.
That I love you, Mama.
I love you too. I will not be around forever to be praying for you. The best thing I can give you is to introduce you to your maker. So that's why I'll be insisting on him.
The preeminent position of mothers in our societies is near unanimous in all societies and cultures around the world. Globalization and the flattening of our worldview has congregated the recognition and celebration of our mothers into a mega show of uninhibited public outpouring of adulation and celebration dubbed Mother's Day. However, placing our mothers on the highest pedestals has gone hand in hand with an absurd and highly illogical belief that women, the gender of our mothers, are necessarily created as inferior appendages to the male species. Unfortunately, this notion is as grounded in our own traditions and cultural beliefs as they are legitimized and entrenched on the teachings and practices of the two great religions of Christianity and Islam. In the biblical account of the creation of humankind in Genesis chapter 2, 21 to 23, Eve, or woman, was formed from the rib, also known as side of Adam, that is, man. Regrettably, this has been interpreted as biblical evidence to justify the subordination of woman within both Judaism and Christianity, a perception reinforced by the views of the classical Greek philosophers that the female body was an inferior version of the male body rather than a separate sex. Alas, These views, which prevailed until the 18th century in the West, informed attitudes and treatment of women until the 20th century, before women won the right to vote in elections. The complex relationship between women and Islam is defined by both Islamic texts and the history and culture of the Muslim world. The Quran states that men and women are equal, but goes on to suggest that men are the protectors and maintainers of women because Allah has made one of them to respect the other and because they spend from their means. Therefore, the righteous women are devotedly obedient and guard in the husband's absence what Allah orders them to guard. Alas, there are as many interpretations of the true meaning of the words of the Quran as there are the various practices of the Islamic religion. Although it is fair to suggest that the dominant forms of the faith has adopted the women are inferior and subservient to men. Women in traditional pre-colonial Ghanaian society were seen as bearers of children. Within the traditional sphere, the childbearing ability of women was explained as the means by which lineage ancestors were allowed to be reborn. As it is expressed in the Akan local language, Obata no nimdiane befri, the mother as the progenitor. Regrettably, and in spite of the tremendous progress of women involvement in all spheres of our lives, Ghana has not signed the Convention on the Consent of Women into Marriage, the minimum age of marriage, and registration of marriage, an omission that suggests that today's Ghana is still very much rooted in the procreator role of women. The combination of 1. Traditional customs and norms, and 2. The influence of Islam and Christianity have reinforced and entrenched the beliefs and practice that our mothers and their gender are indeed lesser beings than men. This unfortunate and unacceptable situation has persisted for nearly all of the 60 years of the modern state of Ghana, in spite of the passage of a plethora of laws and the establishment of a specific executive political institution to promote and enforce women's equality. The major issues and concerns for women in Ghana have been identified as encompassing women's low participation in governance, their poor access to resource critical for making a living, their predominance among people living in poverty, and women's health, particularly the unacceptably high rate of maternal mortality. Other concerns include the harmful and discriminatory social practices against women, often justified in the name of culture and violence against women. Widows, aged women, and single mothers all present gender challenges, as do issues of insecurity, disruption, and violence experienced by women in conflict situations. Women make up more than 50% of Ghana's population, and yet there are only 24 women in the current 275-member House of Parliament, including the Minister of Gender Affairs, previously titled Women. There are only 18 women in the present government of 85 ministers and deputy ministers, with 8 as substantive ministers. Only a single regional minister is a woman, thus the Eastern Region, and 2 of the 10 deputy regional ministers are women. Representation at the grassroots level fares no better, with so far a monocle number of 5 women in the 69 metropolitan, municipal, district chief executives appointed so far, out of the total of 215. A plethora of laws and legislations have been passed as part of the efforts to bring the status of women from subservience to parity with men. Unfortunately, many of these laws are gathering dust on institutional bookshelves, either lacking the legal instrument for implementation or, more seriously, being disregarded with contemptuous disregard or breaches by men without any effective sanctions. From female genital mutilation to rising cases of domestic violence against women, from trocosi to the humiliation and denial of entitlement of widows, from refusal by men to pay child support to preferential treatment of boys by fathers, from the suppression of women's advancement in the workplace to the appreciable representation of women in public and political office. The subservience and second-class position of women to men has remained largely intact in Ghana, despite our subscription to international conventions and the many years of civil society activism. With a unique ministry headed by a committed human rights and gender specialist, is Ghana on the cusp of a new wave of real and substantial progress of not just talking about and passing shelf-bound legislation on women's equality emancipation, but one that pushes for strong affirmative action to make men and women equal indeed at all levels of our daily lives. It is when we have achieved gender parity that the Ghanaian man can justifiably continue to celebrate his mother as the pinnacle of his affection, love, and respect. Mother's Day will then become both a personal thanks to our mothers and the acceptance of the Ghanaian women as equal to the men at all times.
Mother of nature, beautiful woman, beautiful woman.
Welcome. Tonight marks the last of the first season of Tarzan's Take. And it's appropriate that we should focus on the issue of women. Every one of us asked who their hero or heroine is refers to their mother. But it's a very strange situation where we all love our mothers, but our society does not respect and give equal rights to women. I have with me tonight Dorcas Kokapia, Executive Director, Gender and Human Rights Documentation Center, and one of our leading advocates for gender equality. Welcome, Dorcas.
Thank you.
Good. Can we start off by actually finding a little bit about where the Documentation Center sits in this whole plethora of women's rights institutions and active advocates?
Okay, I see the organization is actually Gender Studies and Human Rights Documentation Center. We're looking at gender, doing the studies and putting it in the context of human rights.
Do you have any specialist areas of gender that you study? Or?
No, generally what we do is our studies is relating to anything that we believe has differential impacts on men or women. So we would, for instance, do some research on, say, violence against women. Okay. We'll look at the issue of HIV and women's vulnerability to infection. We'll look at inheritance, and the issues relating to property rights of women. So those are the areas. Anything that we feel has a relevance to women and men and the differential impact of whether the laws or policies or a custom is the areas that we study and look at it from its human rights.
But in the general milieu of things, we know that our women are getting a raw deal. So in your studies, do you reflect the fact that there's inequality and therefore that should be reflected in the
Well,
in the
certainly, that's why we do the studies. Normally sometimes when you talk about gender studies or you're talking about gender and people are saying, oh, but why do gender is about men and women, but why are you always working for women? But the point that I always like to point out is that gender has also been used as a developmental tool to analyze the differential impact of activities, whether government, private, on the two sexes. And then when it's found that one sex or one gender is disadvantaged, then that is where you take the remedial steps to rectify the disadvantages. So we work on the issue of women. We're working, you're talking about disadvantages or, inequality. There's several inequalities, as far as women's rights are concerned.
So your work does reflect that?
It does, yes.
Where does the documentation come in?
The documentation aspect is the fact that prior to us, if you went to, say the Ministry of Gender and said you wanted to have some data on women, you're not likely to find it. They'll probably ask you to go to, say, the University of Ghana or somewhere else. So what we found was that, looking for information on women and gender specific, you find that there was no place that you could walk into and find all the information you needed. So that is the aspect of it. So we, apart from our research, we also do documentation. So more like a library of information on women.
Good.
Yeah.
I wanted to get that set up. But moving on to the institutional arrangement, it's been like just about 12 and a half years since a specific ministry was established, first for women. Now it is called gender, although when I checked on their website, the before and after write-up is still the same. That's by the way, between the women. In 12 years of having a specific ministry, as a gender advocate and specialist, what do you see as it having done to make the work of advocates easier or to improve the